host, political commentator, and activist has made an empire out of saying exactly what he thinks, and that spirit is what made his creation, The Young Turks, one of the largest online news shows in the world. The former lawyer and outspoken critic of idiocy sat down with us earlier to discuss how alternative media like The Young Turks is seen as subversive or inflammatory. Tabitha asked him how in the world, where the mainstream media's main objective seems to be subverting dissenting voices and arousing anger over manufactured threats, can the alternative media serve the public better?
Well, if fighting against this incredibly corrupt establishment is inflammatory, then I'm enormously proud of being inflammatory. Yes, I would. They've got a nice little apple cart going just for themselves. I would like to overturn that apple cart. They're right about that. So if they're scared of us, they should be. Now, that's on a political level, but on a media level, they should be even more scared. I'll give you some amazing facts. The median age of a CNN viewer is 63 years old. For Fox News, it's 68 years old. Bill O'Reilly's audience is 72 years old. Basically doing a show out of a senior citizen center, okay? Whereas the audience for The Young Turks is 78% under the age of 35. Nearly 80% of the audience is under the age of 35. So, gee, I wonder who owns the future. So if they're trying to do establishment shows, and CNN hires Jay Carney, Fox News hires Karl Rove, MSNBC hires David Axelrod, and they want to talk to their insider buddies, have at it, Hoss. We're going to take your entire audience.
I have to say I agree with you. It does seem odd. It's like I don't know who they think they're going to sell to in 10 years. They're most of their audience is either going to be not alive or...
Well, yeah, I mean, you mentioned earlier that like over half your audience is under 35 years of age. And the mainstream media always kind of hear them, calling them, lazy, gullible, naive. Yet they're always pretending to court them. What is it about that age group, the under 35s, in particular, that makes them a different news consumer? Than, as you were saying earlier, these, the 60s, 70s, all of that.
So honestly, it's because they're far more savvy. I know that makes establishment heads explode. No, young people are stupid. Us old geezers are the smart ones. No, that's not true. The older audience, unfortunately, is used to television where you are lied to nonstop. Everything is fake. Everybody reads from a prompter. Everybody is coy. They're news actors. They're not news anchors. They don't care about the news. They're impartial to the news. They don't care, right? Whereas the under 35 crowd has realized that that's all fake. And what they're looking for is something authentic. And so when they see something authentic, they go, okay, now that's a guy that I trust. I might agree, I might disagree. He might be a conservative, he might be a liberal, he might be a libertarian, but at least we're having a real conversation. So if I'm on the side of authenticity and I'm on the side of the savvy consumers, and by the way, 70% of our audience has college education. So I'm pretty sure that they know what they're talking about. So they've got, the establishment media has it exactly wrong.
I agree. I completely agree. I think one of the things that that people constantly complain about is millennials are dumbling it. Millennials aren't involved, and I think they're in for a very rude awakening in 2016 because of that. You wrote an article back in 2011 entitled "Why Brian Williams is Irrelevant," in which you laid out the case that today's media is divided into three categories: the collectors, the aggregators, and the interpreters, leaving no place for traditional news anchors that you were talking about. Do you think television journalists should abandon this veneer of objectivity? And is the concept of objectivity sort of outdated in this really hyper-partisan media environment? Like, can everybody just be honest about it? Or do we still need people like Brian Williams to read the news?
So there's two parts to that question. So the first part is about what does objectivity mean? And this is a very important point. The mainstream media has conflated two things that are not the same thing. One is neutrality, the other is objectivity. So neutrality is Republicans say this and Democrats say that. Now, what's the real answer? I don't know. I'm just here to be neutral, right? So Bush administration says Saddam Hussein and 9/11 in the same sentence, and Democrats say nothing. So I'm not going to tell you if Saddam Hussein actually did 9/11. That's why when we go to the Iraq War, 70% of the country believes that Saddam Hussein attacked us on 9/11. That is objectively false. So the media did a terrible job of being objective. They did a wonderful job of being neutral. Neutral doesn't get you to the facts. If you're a sports reporter and you were neutral, the Lakers played the Spurs. The Lakers say they won, and the Spurs say they won. Yeah. Well, who won? Who won? What? There are real facts in the world. So they let go of objectivity in order to chase neutrality so they don't offend anyone. So they're completely wrong on that count. And they misunderstand it. And then second of all, look, at this point, there is definitely value in objective reporters, as I've outlined here. AP, Reuters, New York Times, all those organizations being objective are great. But if you're a news anchor, we already got the news. So we're not getting the news from you at 6:30 p.m. at night. By golly, gee, I don't know what's going on in the world. Let me tune into Walter Cronkite. Those days are gone. They're gone. So what value are you adding? So one way to add value is to give perspective, to give analysis. So right now, though, the way that the mainstream media is doing their news curation and primetime news provides no value. It's a regurgitation of neutral reporting that doesn't even get you the facts. It's a double loss.
Yeah, very good point. Very good point.
Speaking of Brian Williams, you also made some comments recently in the press about the press has no right to criticize him for his fabricated Iraq helicopter strike. Can you kind of explain that to me?
Sure. So, first of all, I used Brian Williams in the past because he's actually a really decent and smart guy. So my point is that this isn't personal, right? And I picked the guy that I thought was the most decent and the smartest of the lot, right? And I say even he is in an environment where you're not providing any real value to the audience. So it's not like I don't like Brian Williams. I actually do kind of like Brian Williams. Now, in the case of him saying, "Oh, I was in this helicopter or that helicopter," did he do the wrong thing? Certainly, nobody's hiding that at all. At least I'm not hiding it, even though I admit my bias that I know him a little bit personally, just a little bit. And I like the guy, but he clearly did not tell those stories in an accurate way. But you're going to tell me that that's the main problem with prevarication around the Iraq War? Are you kidding me? MSNBC fired their top-rated host, Phil Donahue, at the time. They moved Ashley Banfield into a closet because they weren't for the Iraq War. I believe there was a Ventura who was also against the Iraq War, also got moved off of MSNBC for the same exact reason. Your entire company lied us into a war, and now you're nitpicking over which helicopter your anchor was in? That's not the real problem with the lies in the Iraq War. The real problem is the motherload of lies that the Pentagon, the White House, and the media, including NBC, told. That's the real problem.
As a Ventura, during that time frame, I can honestly assure you that's exactly the reason that they kept him off the air for those 3 years. I think another problem with the television news media in general is the lack of transparency when it comes to the background of various contributors and the talking heads. For example, you got military analyst for Fox News, retired General Jack Keane, has frequently called to put boots on the ground in Syria and Iraq to fight the Islamic State. Yet it's never disclosed that he sits on the board of weapons contractor General Dynamics and is a special advisor to private mercenary group Academy. How can we expect impartial analysis from people who profit so heavily from war, and why we should know that? Do you agree that we should know their backgrounds, their complete backgrounds, before they start parading them out as experts?
1,000%, no question. The most damning reporting ever done on Brian Williams was done by Glenn Greenwald and others who pointed out that they bring on these generals and they don't disclose their enormous conflict of interest, that they personally would profit from the wars that they are pushing us into. So to me, that is 1,000 times worse than any white lie told about whether he was in action or not in action. So if you want to go after Brian Williams and all of the anchors and all of the news stations for that, I'm completely on your side. These guys sell us into wars, and they have the audacity to say, no, these are good guys. They would never lie. What do you mean they would never lie? They're making hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions of dollars from those wars. You've got to disclose that to your audience.